Hi guys, my topic is dialect discrimination against AAVE. Both as a student of this class and a future educator, I was interested in learning about the inclusion of AAVE in the classroom. We've talked about it a good deal in class, I know, but I wanted to learn about the causes of dialect discrimination and some ways to counteract it so that I would be prepared for my secondary classroom when I got there. I also wanted to find a few ways that it affects us in society. I started with defining AAVE and trying to find its origins. AAVE, of course, is African American Vernacular English. It's also been called Black English, Black Vernacular English, Black English Vernacular, and Ebonics. I chose to stick with AAVE because in what we talk about when we talk about Ebonics, author Rosina Lippy Green says it's the term used most by African American linguists. There are also some negative connotations behind some of the other terms, so I stuck with AAVE, even though I have a really hard time pronouncing it. And sorry about that. So where does AAVE come from? African American writer James Baldwin, in his essay, If Black English Isn't a Language, Then Tell Me What Is, contends that AAVE was created as a lingua franca to help slaves communicate with one another the dangers that were around them. That's about as close to an answer as I was able to get, and here is one of my favorite lines from Baldwin's essay. And Baldwin says, "A language comes into existence by means of brutal necessity, and the rules of the language are dictated by what the language must convey." So what is dialect discrimination? We all know people use language to mark differences in culture, race, region, nation, and the like. Dialect discrimination starts when people label speakers of other dialects other than their own as wrong, and it's experienced in just about anywhere there are differences in speech patterns, not just for speakers of AAVE, though they do seem to get the brunt of it in America. People who take this stance are called standard language ideologists. And in the same article mentioned before, Lippy Green argues that dialect discrimination exists because people notice differences in how other people speak and label them as outsiders. And in order to avoid being labeled, speakers of dialects and regional accents apart from the standard language develop the ability to code switch. Code switchers are also called by dialectalists in quite a few of the essays that I found. Lippy Green points out that approximately 80 to 90% of AAVE speakers are bidialectal, not because they want to, but because they see the need to fit into advanced society. And in the same essay from Baldwin as before, he shares a few reasons why Americans discriminate against AAVE specifically. He believes that dialects are markers of power in society. Because AAVE originated as a way for slaves to communicate and slaves held low positions in society, AAVE continues to take on that lower status. However, he also contends that though whites at best ignore and often degrade AAVE, they make sure to take advantage of the words and ideas its speakers have developed. And here's a list of them from around the time frame that Baldwin was writing his article. So what do we do about it? And Still the Children Suffer, Rebecca Wheeler and Julia Thomas tackle a few ways to incorporate AAVE into the classroom. This can be done in elementary and secondary. They were kind of writing from the perspective of both. I kind of chose to stick more towards the secondary side because that's just me. They divide educators into 3 camps. They call the first one just educators in general, but what they're describing is standard language ideologists. Those are the ones who try to correct AAVE out of students. Bidialectalists want to educate AAVE speakers about their own language and compare it to standard English. And finally, the African American celebrationalists who want to mesh the two languages together to try to eradicate some of the racism that exists against AAVE speakers. For those education majors out there, Wheeler and Thomas give a few fantastic examples of ways bidialectalists have incorporated AAVE into the classroom, such as T-charts that allow students to compare and contrast AAVE with standard English, and then a translation project as well, so students can write first in their own language and then translate it to standard English. This approach eliminates the need to mark language differences as wrong and fosters respect for dialectal differences in the classroom. It also would work well for classrooms who have a good bit of other dialects in the classroom, not just AAVE. So for AAVE in society, some of the ways that we can combat it in the workplace are that we need to realize that there are laws that prohibit dialect discrimination in the workplace. And accent and discriminatory pretext in the courts, Leafy Green acknowledges and defines Title V of the U.S. Civil Rights Act. She shares some examples of court rulings for and against people who have lost their jobs due to dialect discrimination. The major issue is that people can lose their jobs if their dialect impedes their work. That's part of the law that's written in. But it gives people an excuse to just fire people who speak differently. And my last bit of exhortation for us as we go into the workplace, which will be coming up soon for a good bit of us, is don't be a jerk. And that's about it. So thank you guys for listening, and let me know if you have questions.